In preparation for assignment number 4, the tic-tac-toe game, you're going to have to get some practice on two-dimensional arrays, which is what we're going to cover today. We're going to look at declaring them, initializing them, changing them, and passing them as parameters, and possibly returning values from them. So let's get started, and let's go ahead and declare a two-dimensional array. And we're going to declare it very similar to what you should probably use in assignment number 4. So we're going to start off here. We're going to declare it inside the main routine. Again, we don't use global variables. Global variables would have us declaring it up here, and everyone would have access to it, and it's kind of a bad programming practice. So let's go ahead and declare it. We're going to say character and tic-tac-toe. We'll just go ahead and name it, and we're going to say it is a 3 by 3. Now we could go ahead and make those global constants. Tic-tac-toe is always a 3 by 3 grid, always a 3 by 3 grid. It's never anything else unless it's a hybrid of it. Let's go ahead and use some global constants. We'll show you how to change that. So say constant, okay, and we'll make it uppercase. Max tic-tac-toe, okay, equal 3. Alright, so instead of the number 3, what we're going to do is we're going to use max TTT. Okay, very good programming practice, max. Okay, and since both the row and the column are the same size, we use the same number. Okay, so there it is, max TTT. Now that declares it. So now we have a 3 by 3 character array that will hold our tic-tac-toe, and we're assuming that we're going to store X's and O's in that. Okay, and we'll just go ahead and say that, store X's and O's in the playing grid. Okay, so that's how it's declared. Now let's initialize it. Okay, to initialize it, we're going to temporarily take away the semicolon, and we're going to say it's equal to. Okay, now we're going to give it a left curly bracket, and notice that we're going to go ahead and do a right curly bracket too. Now there are a couple of ways to initialize a two-dimensional array. You can either initialize it as a single long string of characters, 9 characters, and every 3 in this case will be a row. So the first 3 will be the first row, the second 3 will be the second row, so on and so forth. We can also go ahead and break it up by row, which is the method I'm going to show you. Again, a couple of ways to do it. I'm going to show you one method, and it just organizes it in a little more logical manner. So I'm going to do the first row first, and I'm just going to go ahead and put some characters in there. Now I'm doing this not because this is the way it's done in assignment 3. Don't get it wrong. A lot of people who are watching these videos take this as, okay, this is how he wants us to do assignment 3. I'm showing you techniques in how to use two-dimensional arrays. Whenever I initialize the tic-tac-toe grid, I want it all blanks. But here I want to fill it when I'm initially building it so I can print it out and make sure it's all in the right place. Okay, here's an O. And here is an X. Again, I want it to initially come up like that. Now, I'm going to show you right here. Notice I put a comma right there. That's the first row, and I'll document that as the first row. Okay, then I'm going to put a left bracket and an X, and I'm going to put it, or no, I want that one to be, let's make that an O, and just make it look interesting. And then we'll make this an X. And then we'll make this also another O. Put a comma right there. And that is our second row. And now we're going to do the third row. And we're going to make it look just like the first row up there. X, comma, O, and then X. Now you'll notice that right here, I'm going to put this comment out here, third row, you'll notice that there is no comma after this one. Each one of the internal brackets up here represents the individual rows themselves. and then the last one is the third row. I don't need a comma because there's nothing that follows it. Notice the syntax. The syntax is very important here because I take off a single comma or a single quote or bracket, it throws it entirely off and it'll be wrong. So you have to be very precise. Every left bracket has a begin right bracket. So every bracket here you can highlight it in these kind of forms and it'll show you the matching one. I have a comma in between the fields inside, and I have a comma in between the different rows themselves. So this is how you initialize the tic-tac-toe grid. So there it is. It's initialized. Now if I were initializing this for the game I'm going to play, I go in and make all of these blanks, and that will initialize that. I don't have to write a program to do it. So now I've got my grid, and before I do anything else, what I want to do is, let me put int up here, make sure that's there. Before I do anything else, what I want to do is I want to make sure that I can print this out properly. So let me go ahead and save this. Okay. And I'm going to write a function. I think there's going to be a lot of functions in this particular assignment. I'm going to write a function to print this grid out just to make sure I've got it correctly. It's not going to have a lot of formatting in it. It's going to print out the rows and columns separately so I can see exactly what the grid is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and name it. I'm going to call it print grid. Okay, and I'm going to pass it in the array itself. I'm going to give it a name of TTT. Alright, now let's explain this. This is also a very important part of two-dimensional arrays, or multi-dimensional arrays, as we should say. You notice I'm passing in a character, and I could put the word constant in front of this. In fact, let me just go ahead and do that. Put the word constant, because I'm not going to change it. And anytime I'm not going to change something, I like to put the word const in front of it, so it prevents me from changing. I'm going to pass in a type character. I'm going to call it TTT, and we know it's a two-dimensional array because it has two sets of square brackets. The last set must have a value in it. It doesn't have to be necessarily the value that it is, but it must have a value. This is what tells C++ that this is a two-dimensional array. We could also put the same value in the first subscript. It's not necessary. It's not necessary. So this is how you pass in a two-dimensional array. Well, let me go ahead and write the function itself. Let me go ahead and copy it. I'm going to copy this, and this is how I start writing it. Say copy. I'm going to go to my end of my routine, my end of my main routine, and I'm going to paste that. I'm going to take off the semicolon and put in my left and right bracket, and for testing purposes I'm just going to say cout printing grid. I'll actually leave this comment there, endo. Now in here I'm going to call it. Okay, I'm going to call it. After I get done here I'm going to test my program. So I'm just going to say print grid, and I pass it tic-tac-toe. Yeah. Alright, let me save this. Okay, works pretty good. Let's build it. Okay, looks good. Debug, start without debugging. I should see print grid, hey, printing grid, and there it is. So, my program works. Very good. Now let's go into, let's actually print the grid out itself. Now, this is a very, very standard approach to working with multi-dimensional arrays. We're using nested loops. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. Print grid, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a for loop. And I'm going to declare an integer row, and I'm going to initialize it to 0, while row is less than max TTT, in other words the number 3. Okay. I'm going to increment the row and do this. So this loop will allow me to get through the first three rows, 0, 1, and 2. Now I'm going to have an inner loop. Now what I'm going to do here is, since I'm going to print out a carriage return at the end of every row, I'm going to need to use square brackets. Okay, and I'm going to have an inner loop. I'm going to say for, and again I'm going to use columns. So once I start on a row, I'm going to print out all three columns and then go to the next row. Print out all three columns, then go to the next row. So that's what the inner loop does. It finishes itself to every one of the outside loop. Column equal 0. For column is less than max TTT column plus plus. Okay. Now what I want to do here is I want to say cout, and I'm going to do a little bit of formatting here. I'm going to print out a space in between each number just so it looks nice, and I'm going to say TTT and say row and column. Okay. Before and after. Spread it out a little bit. Now that will go through and it will do all three columns. After it's done with that, what I want to do is I want to print out a carriage return to put myself to the next line to start the next row. To do that, I just say cout and okay. That should do it. That should be our routine. Alright, let me save this, and again I like to save it and see if there's any syntax here. It doesn't look to be. It's all green. Very good. We'll debug. We'll build solution. Looks up to date. Start without debugging, and there's our grid. Looks pretty good. Looks exactly like we thought it would look. We'll see right there. See it? Okay, so wonderful. Now we have a way of printing out our grid. Okay. All right. Now, what's the next thing we want to do? Well, the next thing we want to do is we want to be able to clear it out, and this is a way of changing it. I'm going to show you this method of changing it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say void, and I'm going to say clear grid. And I'm going to show you these two routines. This will get you started. Now this one's not going to be a constant. I'm actually going to change the grid itself, so I leave the word constant off, but everything else is the same. TTT and then max TTT. I'm passing in a grid. Remember, as I said before, when I'm passing in a character array, a two-dimensional array, the last subscript has to have some value in it. Okay, so there's that. Let me go ahead and write it. To write it, I take the prototype. This is the prototype for it. I copy it. I go down here and I put it on there. I paste it. I take off the semicolon. I put the left right bracket in there. And now I say cout clearing grid window. Now I could go ahead and stop it and write the program, or test the program right here, but I've gotten enough practice at doing this. I'm fairly confident that I can write this simple one. I'm going to call it, and then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to print it back out again to make sure that it cleared. Okay. So here's the clear grid. Now, what's interesting about this is it looks exactly or almost exactly like printing the grid. It's a two-dimensional array. So I'm just going to go copy that code. I've written it once already. We know it works. I'm going to paste it. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take out this indel. I don't need it. I'm not printing anything out. In fact, I'm taking this out entirely. Okay. Equal to that, semicolon. I can even go ahead and take out these because it's just a single statement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the entire grid and I'm going to clear it out. Each space, look at each individual space and set it to a space. Okay, let me take out some extra lines here. make it a little compact. Let me save this. Let me build it. Oh, expecting a return. Alright. Forgot a semicolon right there. Very good. Let's build it again. Very good. Debug. Start without debugging. Very good. Now you'll notice here we print the grid, we're clearing it, and we're seeing we're printed out again. There's all spaces. Very good. That's exactly what we wanted. So this is your introduction to two-dimensional arrays, and in particularly the kind of two-dimensional arrays you're going to need for assignment number 4. Look this video over as many times as you want and practice it. Write this code. Write it exactly as I've got it on here, and practice doing it until you can do it without actually looking at the video or your notes. Very good. Well, good luck to you, and we're on to our next topic.